Joel Schaefer, we first met when we had our 2006 Whole Grains Council conference at Disney World in Orlando, because at the time, Joel was their manager of product development and special diets. And we loved his passion for whole grains and invited him to join our Whole Grains Council Culinary Advisors. And so we've known Joel for several years. Since then, he's created his own company, Allergy Chefs Incorporated, specializing with meeting the needs of people with allergies. He's published a book called Saving People with Allergies, and more recently has been working with college and university food service. So today, Joel will talk about millet, and then he will show us his recipe for making millet falafel using millet, a gluten-free grain from Bob's Red Mill. So this is going to be a very interesting demonstration to show, again, how we can bring whole grains to be real center-of-plate, entree-type dishes, not just a little something you put on the side instead of the white rice. This is really using whole grains to their ultimate. We about set, Joel?
Almost. I'll be right with you.
Okay,
if you
great.
want to chat amongst yourselves, have a good time, and stretch your legs, that's always a good time to do that. It's okay, you can talk amongst yourselves too. I'm not going to listen.
He's almost ready. And again, we will be trying this dish at our reception tonight. And this is a millet sweet potato falafel, as you can see on your recipe here, with a cilantro lime aioli, which sounds very interesting to me.
Can you do me a favor? Grab
Traditionally, falafels
spoons.
made primarily with chickpea flour, and now we're mixing the millet with the chickpea flour.
Okay, that works. And then I need to know where I got power.
Looks like my staff is finding all the goodies that they need. Usually at an Oldways conference, even though we do have big emphasis on food, we often have 1 or 2 chef demos. So we were getting way out here on our limb here of just packing in the demos, and there is a little bit of overhead involved with trying everything out and changing over. Okay. Everything accounted for?
It looks like I'm just...
Okay. Now, are you doing slides first, or are you just plowing?
Slides first.
Okay. Then we are ready.
Can't start without a mixing bowl. Am I on? Man, whew, that's a lot of fun. That's speed. That's what you call speed demoing, or I haven't done that yet, but we've been on speed demoing all day. So thank you for the introduction. I do want to thank Bob's Red Mill for having me come out, and Old Pathways, Whole Grains Council for having me back again. It's great to be back, having a lot of fun with whole grains. She gave you a little information about myself and what I have done in the past, but I do need the clicker. Clicker will help, yes. But we're talking about millet, mighty millet. Is that it?
Yes.
That's a cool looking, and I think it's, all right. So with gluten-free being on the forefront of dietary requests in the food service industry, we need to really focus on many of those gluten-free grains to keep our clients excited. And we had made some comments earlier about the trends of gluten-free and where it's going. Seeing it's my passion, it's very important to me and many chefs out there to take care of our customers that are looking for that. And whole grains are a perfect option for that because there's so many of them. So there are 11 gluten-free grains. Did you know that? Raise your hand if you knew there were 11 gluten-free grains. Yeah, you don't count, all right? So, on your piece of paper there, list the 11 gluten-free grains. I'm just going to give you a minute. Just write it down. What do you think the 11 gluten-free grains? We've already talked about a bunch of them already. So they're right there. They're waiting. we'll give you a standing ovation. How's that? No? Oh, okay, well, thought that would work. So just take a minute, write it down. We talked a lot of them. And I always like to think about, how about alphabetical order? There is one that starts with an A. Yeah, very good, Amaranth. What about another? What's B? Very good. We give you 2 already. What about C? Is there one for C? Very good. How about D? I won't go through the whole alphabet. But do you see what I mean? I like to go that way. It's a sort of a chef thing. It's in process. But 30 more seconds, and we'll see if you can know what they are. Is anybody done already? Write them down? No, you don't count, Cynthia. I can't have you write them down. And then we'll reveal them here in a second. I think the blank screen comes up. And we're going to start with the first one, which you already know. Amaranth, right? That is the first one. Great grain, very unique in its flavor profiles. A little more hard to cook with because it's a small grain. It cooks in a certain way, and it can be a little sticky, but it's really flavorful. You had it in a soup. It was awesome. I love the flavor profiles in the soup. Second one, buckwheat. I've worked a lot with buckwheat. Put it some in my recipes. It's really great for pilafs. It's got a unique shape, almost like a triangle-ish shape, but it's really, really nice flavors, real tasty. Corn, of course. You can do a lot with corn out there. Millet, which I'm talking about. Of course, that's one of them, so that was the next one. Montina is another one. Oats. We love oats, gluten-free. Bob's has a great gluten-free oats. Quinoa. We all know quinoa is way out there. It's all over the place. We're using it a lot. I love it myself. Rice. Sorghum. Teff. And what's unique about teff? It's the smallest grain in the world. It's awesome. And wild rice. 11 gluten-free grains out there that are usable for your menus and for those that are looking for gluten-free options. Who got it all right? Raise your hand.
You got pretty close.
How many did you get? 10. Oh, very good. What one did you miss?
Well, wild rice.
Wild rice. It's just sort of that, that can't be in there, but. Yes, you did. Excellent. So, what are the benefits of gluten-free grains? 9. Well, we'll give you 10. How's that? All right. The benefits of gluten-free grains that there are a great, other than being versatile, they're delicious and beneficial that can be beneficial for your health. They're a great source of protein, vitamins, minerals, fiber, fatty acids, antioxidants, phytochemicals. Many of these grains actually contain 8 essential amino acids, which is great. We can get that balance in our diet by eating some of these grains, and they're right there: amaranth, buckwheat, quinoa, and teff. These are easy to digest, too. There's many of them that are easy for your body to digest, which is great for people with stomach issues. These are some of the ones that can help you digest: amaranth, buckwheat, millet, quinoa, sorghum, and teff. Another great options for those menus that you have out there. And I really like the presentation that you did earlier about the different items that are really getting on menus nowadays. So, mighty millet. That's the grain that we're talking about, the grain of harmony. Before rice was widely consumed in Asia, there were different forms of millet widely cultivated in the region because of a short growing season and the minimal need for rainfall. And it was mainly grown in northern China. Millet's legacy persists in the Chinese language, where the signs for millet and mouth together makes the word harmony. And then it also contributes to peace. Evidence indicate that millet spread to the Black Sea by travelers coming from China. Today, millet is the world's 6th most important grain, India leading the way, with 8 African countries and China making up the rest of the top 10 producers. So really cool that millet is really stepping forward, and now it's time to get it on our menus. Millet of the past. Millet was one of the 5 sacred grains of China, and one of the earliest recorded writings, Fanshin, I almost got it all right there, Shu, gives directions for the growing and storing of millet. And during that time, millet wine was more popular than tea. Do you imagine that? Who would drink wine over tea? There, you got a few hands there like that, like it. During Marco Polo's adventure, he wrote that during Great Khan's reign, millet was made into gruel cooked with milk instead of making bread because they hadn't created bread yet. During prehistoric times, The people of northern India use millet to make a flatbread called roti, which is still made today. Millet then spread through the Middle East and northern Africa and helped round out the Sumerian diet in 2500 BC. Millet was even mentioned in the Old Testament as it was described as one of the treasured plants that was in the hanging garden of Babylon. So you can see that it has a rich history, and it was proliferated throughout the country. Millet Herodotus, the Greek historian known as the father of history, described, with reservation, I may add, that millet grew in Assyria, the richest of grain-producing countries of that time. He said that the millet grew so tall, he was reluctant to give its height because no one would believe him. It was ridiculous. It was so tall. He said, no one's going to believe me, so I'm not going to talk about it. The Egyptians learned that from Africans that millet could be grown in dry Sahara. Since they were skilled ale and bread makers, they would make millet bread with ale to make it lighter. So they mixed that together and made it lighter bread. Well, the Greeks and Italians quickly learned this technique from the Egyptians, but took it a step further. This is what I thought was very cool. They would soak the grains in grape juice, then make a dough, which was kneaded and left to ferment before baking. So doesn't that sound good? Doesn't that sound delicious? Did we hear? Does that sound delicious? All right. I wanted to make sure you're still out there. And then the poor of Rome made polenta-style porridge from millet. Well, the different types of millet is not just one grain. It's a name given to a group of small seeds, grains, from several different genera of a grass family, Poaceae. The most commonly cultivated varieties worldwide are pearl, foxtail, proso, and finger. Pearl millet originated in Africa and is still grown extensively there. It's also grown in southern United States largely as pasture. Foxtail millet is grown primarily in eastern Asia. In the United States, it is grown in Dakotas, Colorado, and Nebraska. Proso millet was introduced to the eastern United States in the 18th century and is today grown largely in the Dakotas, Colorado, and Nebraska. And finger millet, that one down there, gets its name from the hand-like arrangement of the panicles. It's widely grown in India, where it's called Raji. Depending on the variety, millet can grow anywhere from 1 to 15 feet tall. That's pretty amazing. I'm 6 feet. Imagine that. That's pretty tall. That's why he said, no one's going to believe me if it's 15 feet tall. Not going to. That's 2.5 me. You want to see 2.5 me walking around out there? Good, you laughed. I wouldn't want to see it either. And it usually contains an ungestible hull ranging from paper thin to hard that must be removed before eaten. There are 6,000 varieties of millet whose grains vary from color of pale yellow to gray, white, and red. A lot of varieties. So let's talk a little bit about growing, harvesting, and processing. So millet requires warm temperatures to germination and development and are sensitive to frost. For these reasons, it is normally planted in mid-June to mid-July in the Minnesota and Wisconsin areas. But optimum soil temperature and seed germination is between 68 and 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Proso and foxtail millet are efficient users of water. They're a little more drought tolerant. They don't need as much water to grow and are great in areas of low moisture, partly because they are planted early and thereby avoid periods of drought. Millet has often grown as catch crops where other crops have failed or planting is delayed due to unfavorable weather. So it's a great product. It can go in, and the reason why it can grow quickly. In 45 to 65 days after planting, it can be harvested. So there's a way to, oh my God, my crop is not good. I can get this planted, and I can still get a cash crop out of it. Millet cleaning process, and I contacted Bob's, and they sourced their product from the Midwestern United States. People that get it for them do a screening, magnetic separation, destoning to clean the raw millet first. Then after that, they do hulling, they husk separation and peeling of the product. They whiten and polish it, they sieve it and classify it, and then the whole kernels are color sorted, so you get the same consistent color. When it gets to Bob's, they do their fine milling on their stone mills, And then they do their quality assurance testing and their gluten-free testing to make sure it meets their standards. So millet also was stored exceptionally well. In the past centuries, it was not uncommon that a stock of this grain was stored for famine because it held so well. Well, the nutritional and health benefits can be wide-ranging. They're naturally gluten-free with high antioxidant activity. The high level of magnesium in the grain is great for muscle and nerve function, and it also is easy to digest. It's high in fiber, protein, vitamin B6, niacin, folacin, calcium, iron, potassium, magnesium, zinc. And it's a powerhouse of protein. So there's a lot of goodness in this grain. Well, we're really here now, after you've known a little bit of history and the value to this great grain that's out there, is the culinary basics of millet. So when I was asked to do this, I was talking to Matt at Bob's Red Mill, and he says, would you like to do this? I said, I would love to be part of this. What would you like to do? And he gave me two choices. I said, millet. Oh, I love millet. It's fabulous. I said, great. How about falafel? Oh, I love falafel. I scored twice in a row. And I was just thinking, what could we do? So I wanted to do this millet dish. And this millet dish with and a falafel, because right now falafel is pretty big, right? You see little corners of falafel stations in this, and it's a good munchie to have. It's crunchy, it's textural. You can do a lot of stuff with it. So what we did is I created this recipe for that. So what's great about millet, it's mild, sweet, and nutty, and it's also has like an earthy flavor because those ancient grains have some really depth to the flavor of it. I think it almost has a mustiness to it because I believe it's like from the earth, and it gives you that flavor profile. You can store millet for up to a month. If longer than that, you want to keep it in the refrigerator. The standard water ratio. So there's a standard water ratio for a lot of grains. 2.5 cups to 1 cup of grain. But I can tell you right now, it has to do with the size of the pan and the width of the pan and how you cook it. Because I've done it in different ways with the same amount of liquid, different size pans. It doesn't always work. So this is just a standard ratio. For fluffy millet, it's 1 cup of toasted millet to 2.25 cups of liquid. So you want to toast it. It sort of helps seal the exterior of it so it's fluffy. Sort of like doing pilaf. When you cook pilaf, you cook it in oil, and it sort of keeps the grain from releasing too much starch and getting it loose. And it adds a little nutty flavor to it. Sticky millet is 1 cup of millet to 2.75 cups of liquid. They can use that for croquettes and patties because it's a little bit more moist and dense. Creamy millet is 1 cup of ground millet to 5 cups of water. So you can actually take the millet, put it in a grinder, and grind it into a powdery form. Not powder, but like a cornmeal form, and you can make some really, really good polenta. And then up to 30% of the flour can be added to flour blends to add a unique flavor and some protein base. So in gluten-free blends, you would use millet as a partial piece of that because the flour flavor profiles might be a little bit strong. I've used millet in different ones. I've used Amaranth in the past, and I always like to use a balance of it. I'll throw sorghum in there as the base because it's more naturally flavored like wheat, so you can get that balanced flavors out. So, and that little picture there is a little breakfast porridge I made that was just amazing, just real simple and tasty. So did you learn a lot about millet? Are you like now the experts? We're sort of the experts. But we learned a lot, and that's what's so exciting about whole grains and learning and sharing this with others as you go on and you want to introduce millet into your menu. So let's talk about this recipe. And I'll just pull up the main ingredients. Our millet, sweet potatoes, raw garbanzo beans, and fresh herbs. So we have all of our ingredients here, and it's pretty simple in a sense to make, as long as you have the right tools. So here I have the garbanzo beans, and they've been soaked overnight. The main thing that I found about doing this, after many times, I've made this multiple times to get it right, is you need to drain the garbanzo beans well for a period, at least an hour or so, to get as much moisture off as possible. Because I noticed the difference between well-drained garbanzo beans and not well-drained garbanzo beans. So you don't have to cook these, just have to soak them, put them in your blender. And then we're going to add on our other ingredients. We have some red onions. And then we have our garlic. And then we have jalapenos. So there's a lot of different, I was looking at different recipes. I love jalapenos, cilantro, I love all that stuff. So I wanted to put these ingredients in it to give it a different flavor profile. And then we have cilantro. I want to make sure I have the right amount. That looks like a quarter cup, and this is parsley. And then this is, I'm just making sure I have the right in one. I'm a chef, I can do this. I can stick my nose in food, okay? So you're not eating this one anyway, so don't worry. The chefs didn't do that back then. They didn't stick their face in it, so. All right, so you're okay now? You're not worried? All right, good. So we're going to get this in there. That looks like a little bit too much. And then salt and pepper, of course. And then we have garam masala. I chose that because it's just one of my favorite spices, so chefs like to cook with their favorite ingredients, so threw it in there. And there's lemon juice right here. And it says in the recipe that you take this, and this is my favorite power tool, by the way. So no one take it when I'm not looking, all right? A lot of us chefs have power tools. So it's a brawn. It's followed me. It's traveled with me many places. So when you're doing it, you sort of puree it, and then you sort of have to shake it to get everything down there, and then you puree it, chop it, puree it, chop it. Could almost have a dance or a song with that, right? Yeah? Was it a good song? I don't know. It was working. I was working on it. So we get this nicely grounded, and how many of you made falafel? Raise your hand if you made falafel before. Isn't it all about the texture, right? It has a unique texture. You cannot puree these ingredients till they're nothing. That's not falafel. It's got a little texture. That's why you leave the garbanzo beans uncooked, right? That sort of sounds good. I like the echo. So I got to shake it up. Aha. How's that look? Can you see that? Scope in there. Texture. Looks just about right. Crumbly, like a course meal, right? Then it talks about the lime juice in there. Again, jalapenos, cilantro, lime, garam masala, all that kind of stuff goes together. Oop, better get it. All right, so there we go. Into the bowl it goes. That looks pretty darn good. Okay. Then we have sweet potatoes. You can use yams, all types. Moisture content is very important to this because this is the moisture that's added to this dish to get it right. So we add that in there. And then we have the millet, which is right here. So let me get my measuring. I've learned all these years I've been writing cookbooks and doing all that kind of fun stuff, as my wife always tells me, my wife's here, did you measure that? No, dear, I didn't. I'm a chef, I didn't measure it. Now I measure everything. Because every time you want to rewrite a recipe, you want to have it pretty close to what you first did the first time, right? So, as you can see, look at how this cooked up. As soon as I get this measured in here. See that it has a nice color, beautiful yellow color, right? And see how it fluffs up when you cook it? And that's what's nice about it. So you have different ways you can make this. So if you get it nice and light, you can put it into a salad. It goes great in the falafel. So, and if you want to hide in that whole grain, this is how it sort of can be slid in, because it just fits into the texture and the flavor, but you know you got whole grains in there. And when you add the more water, you can do the porridges. I actually did, I made like a polenta style, and then I cut it, and I opened it up, and I put a little bit of goat cheese in there, and I sort of put it back together and heated it and let the goat cheese melt. Oh my gosh, it was delicious. So here we go. Now we're going to just mix these ingredients together. So I'm using my rubber spatula, folding it, and having it hit me in the face. So I guess it's getting back at me for blending it in the blender. I don't know. So I'm just spreading it about. Here, let's move these two out of the way. So I want to do this first and really get these two ingredients mixed together so I don't pulverize this when I add it in there, because that's going to be the part where I added that in there. And then I can loosely mix this together. You need to have a glass bowl, right? That would be much better, a glass bowl. Can't really see what I'm doing. Can you see that? Yeah. I'm actually making up a sweat here. Must be that light there. It's almost blinding me. That's why I wanted to check. I'm getting blind. I can't see out there. So, all right. So, see how that looks? It's still crumbly, right? But that's the texture to it. Okay, so that's going to come over here. And then, could you do me a favor? Could you grab me my pan that's probably sitting back on that cart? That would be awesome. I could get my stove started. So the other dish is I added to this. So this is gluten-free and vegan. So I have just mayo, sweet chili sauce, well, we got to get the just mayo in there. Anybody ever tried just mayo before? It's just mayo. Oh, you know what? I have my flour here I forgot to add in there. Didn't anybody see that? I didn't add my flour? You did? Why didn't you say something? Chef, you forgot to put the flour. And it's got lime juice, more flavors. It's got miso. It's got some of these herbs. We'll just put them in there. And more fun stuff. And then it's fun. And then some agave nectar. And then that's sort of our sauce. This was a sauce that I was, it's a cilantro-based sauce. And we go to this restaurant in Portland, and they have the best sauce ever, and I've been trying to recreate it. I wasn't successful in recreating theirs, but I've created a really good one here. So it was just a challenge. So you got this nice little sauce here, some chunky, some flavor that'll go with it. I'm going to turn my little stove on over here. Make sure that's right. We're going to pan fry. So we have a little bit of grapeseed oil. Put that in the pan just a little bit. Let that warm up. And so this is optional. Even though the recipe, it says using the chickpea flour, if you notice your mix is a little wet, the chickpea flour can be used as the additive to give it a little bit more binding agent. So let me look at this as a binding. And I would use a portion scoop. Chef, he's probably paying attention. He's not measuring this. Where is it? Portion scoop. I got a quarter cup here. We'll use that for our... But I think that's a nice feel to it. It has a little bit of wetness. I want to keep it that way when I make it. So what we're going to do is we're going to pan fry these. So you can make these, if you're going to deep fry them, use the flour to give it a little bit more binding and holds it together. If you want to pan fry it, you can leave it out so that you retain some of that moisture and that flavor. So I'm going to make sure we get that nice and warm. And the way that I have written the recipe, this is a food service-based recipe, so you're going to have to make a lot of these for a catered event. You would pan fry them, get them brown on both sides, put them on a sheet pan, so that when you can do 200-300 of them, put them to cool, and then when you need to reheat them, you just put them back in the oven and just reheat them and serve them. Because this is something that you're not, if you could do deep fried, you could actually do batches of deep frying and send them out. I just try to do this a little bit more for the healthiness to try to keep it from doing that. I've also taken you can take your griddle and oil it down or spray it with a spray and then wipe it and then cook them on that, so you can use less oil that way and keep it a little more on the healthier side if you're trying to stay away from fats. And it sounds pretty good. It's cooking up really well. So as I'm finishing up these few items, I don't know if we want to take questions while I'm finishing this. Well, and then we can get our next chef up here working on
questions about
her
millet
stuff.
or about millet falafel or about cooking for people with allergies or any of Joel's areas of expertise?
They are.
Yes.
Excellent.
Chef,
Yes.
you mentioned in the beginning you had a slide that had the different grains that were had 8 essential amino acids.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm going to look really ignorant here, but I always thought it was only quinoa that had all 8. Like Amaranth had 7, and I didn't even know the count on buckwheat, and was it oats? Or teff? So, can you just speak to that? So I thought quinoa, they describe as a complete protein because it has 8 essential amino acids. Am I off base here?
From the first search that I did, I found that those had essential amino acids so that they can help balance out that diet that you're looking for. Say you're staying away from a meat in general, you have some of these that carry essential amino acids that will really help benefit your diet. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm on more of a plant-based diet, so I look for those grains that can give me that balance in my diet. So based on my research, that's what I had come up with.
Any other comments? Yep.
They're smelling good, as the first chef said, smell the vision,
All right.
Can you smell it? All right. I like that.
So I have a quick question.
Yes.
I'm not familiar with Montina. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that grain and what it's used in and some popular dishes?
Actually, I've made minimal. When I did this years ago, it's a grass that they turn into a flour. So it's just a special grass that they produce, I want to say, in Montana area. And when I did this research for this I think it was about 7 years ago, that was one of the products I came across, and I had them send me a sample, and it's a very dark tan to brown flour. And they use it in breads and different types of mixes. It's very intense flavor-wise, so you have to sort of blend it with some other flours to make it work, because otherwise it dominates in the flavor. So you could look into that online to see if that product's still out there. I just wanted to share that there are other options out there, but it was a small piece of the market at that time.
Yeah, and anything that is in the Poaceae family, botanically speaking, can be considered a whole grain, and there are many others that we don't know about, hear about. So next time the quiz may be more than 11 if you really want to get particular. So we count anything that's in the Poaceae family, and then we also count the pseudo grains, amaranth, quinoa, and buckwheat, because they have similar nutrition profiles and similar uses to the quote-unquote real grains, and that's where they get that term pseudo grain.
Back there?
Any other questions? Yeah, now I'm back up front. I can smell it too.
I was just wondering if the millet in this recipe is toasted.
Millet in the recipe is listed?
Toasted.
It is not toasted. No, it was just cooked to make it more of a fluffy. I did not toast it, but you could. If you wanted to add more distinctive flavor, you could just toast it. I'm almost ready. I was just waiting for a little plate. But I hope you learned something new. I always learn something new every time I get involved in something like this. These are almost done. The flavor profiles, I can just smell. It is wonderful. I'm hoping that you're going to enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed it for the last probably 2 months, because I've made it so many times in so many different ways. But when you finish it, a little bit of brown color on there. It smells pretty radical. Is that what I heard
Tip
back?
that just a little bit toward the camera, and we can see it.
We will do that. I'll get a little bit of sauce on there.
Okay.
Thank you. What I did, I paired this one with some arugula, with a little bit of light vinaigrette, like a lemon vinaigrette, and it was real nice. It's like a little salad, a little appetizer kind of salad. So there you go. That is a sweet potato millet falafel.
Great. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. I know. If any of you are in the back that want to take a minute while they're resetting, just to come up here with your noses and smell it, it's quite intoxicating, and we'll look forward to eating that at the reception for sure.
Oh, thank you. I don't know if you want to leave that here for a second.
Slow
but just
torture.
leave it right here for. They might want.
Do you want to say one
wanna,
say 1 minute while we're remind people about the Instagram? While sure.
Leave this for the
just a
one chef
reminder,
wants
we
this
have
one,
a
they said.
wonderful Bob's Red Mill bag full of a lot of
yes, they
fun
might need that, so I'm gonna
goodies,
let them
including
eat.
some
Yeah,
cookbooks,
I
an
think
apron, a Bob bobblehead. We will be
chef wants to make
selecting
sure-
one person to win
Yeah, this
the
needs-
whole thing tomorrow. All you have to do is Instagram some photos of the conference, maybe the conference food later, with the hashtag WGC Chicago. And you can follow Oldways_PT if you would like to make us extra happy. Okay, thanks. There you go.
I think one thing that we want to emphasize coming out of this millet presentation and getting ready for Sharon's sorghum presentation, Joel focuses on allergies and people who need to eat gluten-free. But I think the real message here is that, again, it's wonderful that there are all these wonderful gluten-free grains. Let's make wonderful recipes for them. And then they're available to everybody. People who need to eat gluten-free, people who think they need to eat gluten-free, and people who don't give a diddly and just like a really delicious dish. So that's a good reason to use some of these gluten-free grains. And of course, I don't mean in any way to lessen the issue for people who have a real medical reason for avoiding gluten, but as we all know, there's that group, and then there's this great middle where people think that all of their problems in the world will be solved if they just avoid gluten. And I just say, it doesn't matter, it's just good, so let's all eat it. And let's not get into who's who. While they're finishing setting up, I will start to do introductions.